Hello writers, I'm Karena Akhavein from Spalmora. I am a PhD in literature and I am an educator and a motivator who considers it her job to take you from aspiring beginning writer to successful author. So let's get started. You'll also want to subscribe so that you can keep abreast of all the new videos that we have coming out each week, and also so you can get information on all of our upcoming events and other news. Today we're going to be talking about a very important question, and that question is my story good? It's a question that a lot of young, beginning, unsure of themselves authors tend to ask, and actually some more experienced authors also want to know, is my story any good? And why do they want to know that? They want to know that because if your story isn't that great, you're going to be wasting your time if you try to plug away at writing it. And even if you do manage to write it, you're going to kind of lose motivation because the story is not grabbing your attention. And that's a sign that it's not going to grab the attention of a reader, nor are you going to find an agent or a publisher for your book. So it's not going to move your writing career forward. So I want to streamline that whole process. I want to have you avoid the mistakes that are going to slow or stagnate your writing career and figure out right away if your story idea is good. First of all, let's talk about what people mean when they say a story idea. Half the time, a story idea is not actually a full story idea. It's usually a premise. So it's usually something like, girl moves to a new town, goes to a new school, and discovers that people at the school are vampires. That's a premise. That is not a story. A story starts to include plot, setting, characters, all of that stuff. So let's talk about what does make a good story. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a list of little questions that you can ask yourself to really double make sure that your story is in fact a good story and that it's worth you developing it into your novel. Okay, so let's get started with things that a story has to have. What makes a great story? First of all, a story needs to have a great immersive setting. What does it mean when I say that a setting is immersive? It means that you give the reader enough details to really give them the flavor of that setting, and that setting is going to play an important role in your plot. It's actually going to shape some of the events through some of its qualities. So think about really good settings like Hogwarts is an example of a super immersive setting where when you read Harry Potter, you can just completely imagine yourself there, and the actual physical details of Hogwarts can shape some of the action in Harry Potter. Another important thing that a good story has is characters. And your characters can't just be flat characters. They have to be complex characters with flaws and motivations, things that make them move that story forward as they experience the events that you are going to set forward. In terms of characters, you're also going to want to think about having a good antagonist, a good protagonist, and then good supporting characters. We have other videos on this channel about writing a great antagonist and a great protagonist. You might want to check those out for some quick tips on that. Okay, what else do you need to make a good story? Let me tell you. You need high stakes. What do I mean by high stakes? I mean that your character, if they don't get what they want in the story, it's gonna be bad, really, really bad. It doesn't necessarily need to be life or death, but it really needs to be important. Your reader needs to be implicated and kind of invested in the success of the character in getting what they want. You also need conflict, drama, and tension. You want things not to be so easy. You want characters to be fighting each other. You want the environment to be preventing resolution from happening too quickly. And all of this brings you to the next thing that you need for a good story, which is pacing. You need a great beginning, middle, and end with things happening at each level to bring your story to its logical conclusion. We also have videos about that on this channel, so you can check those out. Okay, so how about the questions that I promised you guys? The questions that are going to help you guys determine whether your story that you've thought of is a good story. Another thing that I should pop in here is that you should have a ton of different story ideas. Like, I'm always writing down story ideas on my phone, and then I just kind of collect them, and every once in a while I'll revisit them, and then I will ask these questions of myself to see which one of those multitudes of ideas would actually make a good book. Okay, so let's start with those questions about, is my story a good story? Question number 1. Is my story original? I know everything's already been kind of written about or said, everything else, but you do need to find some originality within the premise that you've chosen. So that originality is going to come from setting or characters or the way that they resolve the issues that they have. This is where research comes in. It's really good for you to be able to read a lot and research so that you know what's out there, so that you don't end up investing yourself heavily in a really great idea that you thought you had, only to find out that that was published last year. So just be really careful with that. Reading a lot is going to help you to know what's out there and to know if you're being original or not. Here's another question. You're going to think this is silly. Does anything actually happen in your story? A lot of people get really sucked into world building and finding a great setting and inventing some really cool characters, and then nothing actually happens. It just kind of stagnates. There aren't any obstacles, there's no goal, and it's hard to get your readers really involved in something where nothing happens. It gets a little bit boring at the end. So make sure something happens. If you've got a really great premise and nothing's happening, that's fine. You've got part of your story kind of set up. You've got the setting for your story. Now let's move forward with things happening. Let's move forward with plot. And I have another video about plot and plotting and how to do that, so you might want to check that out. Here's another great question. Can you sum up your story in 1 sentence? Okay, maybe 2. It's great to have an elevator pitch. If you can't sum up your story in 1 sentence, you might not be clear on what your story actually is. Sure, you're going to have tons of subplots, things happening at the same time, everything else, but you need to be crystal clear on what your central story is so that you can do your outline and that you can structure your novel, and then add those little pieces in. Also, does your story have high enough stakes? I talked about kind of your character looking at things as a life or death situation, and that's exactly what I mean. That's a question you need to ask yourself. What will your character lose, or what will happen to your character if they don't get what they want? Also, does your story give your main character an opportunity to shine? Does it also give your antagonist an opportunity to shine? That's a fun thing as well. Is there enough of a meaty role? Like, think of your character as an actor. Would your character, if they were an actor, would they want to play that role in a movie? That's a great way of looking at it, to think, okay, is this an interesting enough thing to be happening to my fantastic character? Does your story also give your character an opportunity to grow and change and expand? That's another thing actors look for when they're choosing a role. And you should always think of your story as something that could be made into a movie or a TV show. So that's an important question to ask yourself. Also, here's another really good question. Can you envision people getting excited by your story? Can you imagine who your potential readers are, who your possible viewers would be if it was a movie, and what type of person is going to enjoy reading this story? It's really a good question to look at in terms of your quality of story and whether it's good. Last but not least, are you excited by this story? That's kind of the most important thing. You're the one who's going to be writing this story. You're the one who's going to be working on it for the next year or so. So I hope you're excited by it. Also, if you're not excited by it, it's probably missing a little something to make it good. So there are things that you're going to need to tweak. It's a really useful question to ask yourself. It helps you to determine if you've really done everything right in the background before you start. I hope that you conclude that yes, your story is awesome. If you have any other ideas, any other questions on how to determine whether your story is a good one, please comment down below. Please like this video and check out some of my other ones, and I will see you next time. In the meantime, keep on writing.